Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of The New Standard. And as always, I have my partner in crime to my left. What's up, Big Neil?
Lance, I don't think at any point in my life the days following a Steelers draft were filled with more optimism than this one. We're going to get into that and a lot more. There's plenty of reason to be optimistic. And the best part is, the more I read into it, the more I find people who share the same sentiment for more reasons other than the ones that I think of immediately. The depth of this, it's pretty remarkable. And there's a lot of credit to be given. In many cases, it's credit to be given to other teams for not taking some of these guys a little bit higher than where they went. But the Steelers had, I think, as perfect a draft as they reasonably could have had. And with that, they have solidified, in many cases, the future core of what could be a very good team. That makes me excited here on this Wednesday morning. Gorgeous morning here in Minneapolis. Super excited, Lance. It's great to be here as always.
I had listeners laughing. I was super excited when I did the show on Saturday. I caught the spirit and was just flowing on Saturday and just was like, yes, sir. Because, I never get excited about drafts. And I'm actually excited about this one. But as always, listeners, make sure you check out the show. You can find us on YouTube. Do a search for The New Standard and Neil Coulong or Lance Williams, or as Robert Cotting said, the Neil Standard or the Lance Standard. You can look us up under both. And also, if you do us and want to listen to us via podcast, just go to, however you find your podcast and do a search for the New Standard and Steelers. And so let's jump right into it, Neil, because you alluded a little bit to some reasons and some things that some other people looked at and concerning this draft that you didn't. And so I definitely want to pick your brain in terms of what's your criteria and how do you grade a good draft. But before I do that, I want to share some of the draft grades by some of the media outlets. PFF graded the Steelers draft A plus. The Ringer graded the Steelers draft A plus. Sporting News graded the Steelers draft an A plus. NFL.com graded the draft an A. The
Oh, they're
New York,
obviously idiots.
yes, they're obviously idiots. New York Post graded the Steelers draft an A. And last but not least, DraftKings graded the draft an A. I'm pretty sure a friend of the program, Doug Farrar, gave us a B plus. I'm not sure what Luke Easterling gave us, but I'm going to guess Luke probably gave us an A. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And so if he didn't, hopefully he'll be giving us an A today after listening to this show. But it seems like the media is in agreement that the Steelers absolutely hit a home run. And before we get to our grades of this draft, I want to get your criteria and how do you grade a draft? What are you looking for?
For me, and this is kind of the thing, that there's no particular standard by which to do this. And at the end of the day,
No,
what you have,
there's the new standard.
well, yes, of course,
Yes.
you have a subjective process. If we're looking at this from the team's perspective, they are all going to go about it their own way for their own reasons. There are not a whole lot of, real ground level objective measurements that you can use for anything like this. They're drafting based on what they're doing. And the reality is, with all due respect to you coming up with a grade, Doug, Luke, the New York Times, NFL.com, PFF, whoever, they all have different interpretations of a team inside of which we have no insight. We don't know what they're going to do. For example, most people felt Joey Porter Jr. was worth a mid first round pick, maybe a little higher than that. I personally didn't quite see that, but I think you're splitting hairs after a certain point. I don't think he was worth 17 overall. That's based on observations of him and knowing what I know of the Steelers' coverage schemes that they ran last year, it doesn't mean that they're going to run that this year. I don't know that where I sit. I don't know what their long-term plans are. So Porter may be the absolute perfect fit for what they're going to do. So it's hard to say one way or another. We can go with our optimism. We can go with how good of players we thought they were in college. For me, what I'm looking for is marrying the value of the player with the team's need over the next couple of years. In 3 years from, look at like Pat Freiermuth, for example. We'll use him in that draft. He is coming into his own as a player. He is one of the most targeted tight ends in the NFL. They're going to rely on him heavily in their passing game. We had a decent sense that was going to be the case back when he was drafted. I looked ahead and saw in 3 years, he's going to be, if it works out, he's going to be an important part of this team, and he fits the mold of that. I wasn't the biggest fan of that pick. He's doing okay. We're happy with the players we have.
He's solid.
Second round pick, good enough. He's not a Pro Bowl level guy, but he's a solid player. He's going to get the ball a lot. I felt at the time that wasn't my favorite pick, but it was the right one for them to make. So there are two different things at work here. They needed to address the position. They didn't have any tight ends. Their tight end room was as bad as their running back room was in going into that draft. First two positions they take are running back and tight end. I appreciate that in the sense that they have both an immediate need and a future need at those spots. Both of those players were going to play a lot and looked like they were players that could come in and contribute right away. So if you have those holes, filling them is of pretty paramount value. To me, that's exactly what the Steelers did in this draft, as well as the one back in 2020 when they took Harris, Freiermuth, and then unfortunately Kendrick Green, who they saw as a starting center. Obviously, that didn't work out. But with Broderick Jones, you're looking at a player with tremendous upside. We'll get into him. But they absolutely needed a left tackle for the future. I'm not hearing it from any of Dan Moore's supporters. I'm not trying to rip on the kid. All I'm saying is he's had 2 years as the starting left tackle of this team. I don't think that he's improved any better than marginally. And in 2 years, he's going to get very expensive.
Let me add this, Neil. To what you were saying. And then I want you to get back to your point. You don't have to defend the fact that you don't like the way that Dan Moore plays. You know why? They just drafted a left tackle in the first round. Go ahead, sir.
My point is they saw what we subjectively determined to be the biggest hole on the team. I don't care what Mike T said leading into the draft. We don't really have any holes because of free agency. No, you've got a ginormous hole and you know it. Okay. To not embarrass Dan Moore publicly, I get it. Jones is their starter. They know he's the starter. Dan Moore is going to be the guy who takes the first team reps, starting off in minicamp, getting into training camp. Jones is their week one starter. There's no doubt about that. They filled a need with a potentially very, very good player. Love it. Gotta love that. Second round, you see what's there, especially you're drafting in a spot they've never drafted. You have pole position. You're going to open it up for trades. I don't think they thought of drafting anyone else. I think they would have listened to enormous trade offers, but I think in their mind it was, let's see if we can deal this because we don't need to spend our time. This is the guy we want at 32. And they got him. Long term, absolutely, they need a cornerback. As we talked about off air, they just signed a slot that played in Minnesota last year, and my Viking fan friends were not exactly impressed with him and were laughing at the fact the Steelers signed him. He's going up against Arthur Mollett. You have Patrick Peterson next year. So he's the only one there along now with Porter and the new guy who signed. They needed cornerbacks. So they got a pretty decent cornerback. Somebody I felt was probably more fit to be a late first round pick into a day 2 pick. Good value for that spot at a position of need. Hard to downgrade that. If we want to get into the specifics of the player, we can, but you look at the mentality, of what they're trying to build long term. I don't think that gets valued enough. I think places like PFF, with all due respect to them, they look at rookies as these immediate high level players, and that's just simply not the case. Overall, if we look at the entire draft, including those in the first round, most of them are not going to be good NFL players next year. They're rookies. So you're not drafting them. If you're in a position that you have to draft 5 starters, you're in trouble
You
anyway.
stink.
It's not
You
going to be
stink.
the players' problem. You're going to have guys that shouldn't be starting that have to start. Dan Moore. And you still have that problem 2 years later, causing you to trade up to get somebody better. The point I'm making is the long-term value in terms of the position that they're playing, the flexibility that you are now creating, because you've got, in this case, 2 premium positions drafted that are going to play right away, that are going to be cheap for 4 years. That's valuable. That's something that you can build around, along with a cheap quarterback and not a whole lot of expensive positions coming due anytime soon. You're going to have the flexibility to make moves based on that if you continue to develop capital based on your draft. Throw in Keanu Benton in the other part of the second round, probably a 2-down player in the NFL, but absolutely a guy that can develop into a great talent. And this is a team. It's kind of funny. I joked about this on the radio. Benton is a player that John Mitchell would have loved to coach. And it's unfortunate that Mitchell doesn't get to work with this one. But the value of Benton, look at the positional need, look at the long-term, long-term depth at the position right now. You don't know how long Cam Hayward's going to play. His contract is up next year. I'm not saying that he's Cam Hayward, but I do think if you want to remain versatile, you've got to have options available. And he is going to be a good football player. Just like I said last year about DeMarvin Leal, the way he plays the game, I don't know what his position is, but he's going to get on the field and he's going to kick some ass. He's a good player. He can be used situationally. I've pounded the drum for Isaiah Loudermilk for 3 years. I think he got caught in kind of a numbers game when they brought back Larry Ogunjobi, but he's a valuable component to what they're trying to build. He gives them more options. That's valuable. I think that's a good pick. And on top of all of that, you've got to put it relative to the players who were available. I don't know about anybody else. I told this to my brother after the draft. This is the one draft that I can remember where I felt like they took the guy I wanted with their pick in each of the first 4 rounds. And they had 5 picks in those rounds.
They called you.
They were in my head. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I just know that the value in my world was with these players for a variety of reasons, not just I really like this guy, or he went to my school, or everybody else in Steeler Nation is screaming for this guy. I think it's great that they took him. They're very specific value-based reasons they took these players. I factor that into a draft. So for me, it's more where the team is going. That's what you're drafting for. It's not for next year necessarily. Now, these guys are going to play. Like I said, we're going to see a lot of Broderick Jones. We're going to see a lot of Joey Porter, probably see situationally Benton playing a bit. Maybe Herbig gets in there. My boy, Darnell Washington, who I'm going to dedicate half this show to, a lot of uses for that guy. He might not be a 3-down player either, but they addressed things that they needed, and they got a big value pick out of Washington because he makes them better in terms of their versatility. I want to factor all those things in and then put it up against who else was there in determining my grade. Everybody has a different reason to do what they do, and it's important to gather as many of those opinions. If you want to come up with a strong argument for your own, you've got to do the research. That's just my take on it. I'll listen. Doug Farrar sat down on the toilet this morning and lost more football than I'll ever know, but I don't agree with a B+ grade for this draft. I'm curious what his process is, though I know in my head, just because I've known Doug for a while, why he's calling it a B+ instead of an A+, which I feel that it should be.
So your grade is an A+. And let me summarize, Neil. I'm going to just try to summarize what you said. Your criteria is addressing needs, getting value, and I'm just going to throw in 3, kind of getting the guy that you wanted. kind of getting the guy that you wanted and that you felt or you envisioned would be the best fit for the Steelers. And I'm glad that you said that because that has to fit in because when you're grading anything, it's your personal opinion. So it has to. So if they're hitting players that you envision will be a good player for your team, then that's obviously a great criteria. Let me give you guys my criteria. So you got them as an A. Let me give you guys my criteria. And I was watching a Laker game last night trying to piece this together and big up to the Los Angeles Lakers, soon to be 18-time champions. Had to throw that in there. And also congratulations to you, Neil. The gap tooth bison was the talk of the draft. Isn't he a Bison and NDSU guy, the
You
offensive
bet.
lineman?
Cody Mock, baby. He's going
Yeah.
to be a good one too, down in Tampa Bay, with 3 other guys who look like Vikings like him. Fits in perfectly. He's a good player. He'll need some time to develop, kind of similar to what Tennessee tried to do with the last Bison offensive lineman who was taken, who hasn't fared very well. Another second-round pick, Dylan Radins. We'll see what happens with Mock. I like his game quite a bit. I think he's versatile. We'll see where he ends up. I wouldn't be surprised if they put him at tackle or guard, but a good player. And then Hunter Lipke, a great mid-round running back option who signed as a free agent with Dallas. He missed most of last season and probably cost the Bison a national championship because he didn't play. He would have been a round 3 pick, in my opinion. I heard that from scouts as well. Big kid, versatile, almost kind of a smaller, more running version of Kyle Juszczyk. I could have seen Kyle Shanahan. Unfortunately, I could have seen Jim Harbaugh use him to a pretty high level within those offenses. A very scheme-specific type of player. Really good player. And then
look at you, Bison alum.
You bet,
being
baby.
able to rattle off all your Bison draft picks. But that's big,
Lipke
though.
was my guy. Lipke is he had a career at NDSU. He might have been maybe not the best running back, certainly not talent-wise, but as far as big plays go, I think he came up huge all the time. And you're talking about a white FCS running back, and he's dominating every game that he's in. He was so much fun to watch that kid play. Big kid with quickness, he could catch.
That's great that you guys are building a legacy in that program. Let me give you guys my criteria to grade a draft because I'm like Neil. I was a lot like Neil in terms of looking at drafts overall. Wait for 3 years, get back to me. I'll tell you how I think about the draft. Hence, I never really was a draft guy, like draft nicks, opinions. And, I just got inundated with so much information over the course of time. I just lost my liking or love for the draft. I was just like, man, call me in 3 years. We'll see. Holla at your boy. If all these guys play that you draft, you suck anyway. So I was kind of like Debbie Downer when it came to the draft. But as I've done this more, I've come to appreciate the work that people do, what the draft represents, how it changes lives, how it changes football teams, that there's great theater and great stories around the draft. So I've started to make like a 180 in terms of how I like the draft. So let me give you my criteria. 1, I agree with Neil, absolutely. Address needs. We dispelled the myth on this show, best player available. I mean, if your best player available at 14 was a quarterback, would you draft him? No, because you got Kenny Pickett. So we've obviously addressed that. So number 1 is address needs. Number 2, don't reach and exercise patience. Don't reach for guys. Don't reach for guys that, where it seems suspicious, like, wow, you traded a bunch of assets to get to guys. Perfect example, Devin Bush. They kind of reach for Devin. But some of that, I'll say I'm nitpicking that somewhat because
I don't think it's fair to say they reached
the Devin Bush. But
Devin Bush was reasonably estimated to be drafted around that spot, and the Steelers had a massive need.
They had a massive need.
So
they did have a massive
unfortunately, they had to do it. That risk component was there. And obviously it didn't work out even remotely close. Maybe the biggest miss they've ever had, just considering what they gave up for him and where they drafted him. But logically speaking, they had a reason to do it, and they were behind the eight ball. It was a tough spot that wasn't their own doing. They had to try something. It didn't work out.
Hey, by the way, hey, Jake Shoot stuff. I love that name. But Jake, you're gonna have to change it to Jake Shoot Shit. But maybe you can't do that because of YouTube, and maybe they'll ban you because you use the curse word in your name. But I love Jake Shoot stuff. Lastly, my last criteria is get freaks. Get freaks in your draft. Get
Need dudes.
freaks. Get dudes. Get freaks. And get freaks. And when we say freaks, I'm using, and Neil tipped me to it last year. Thank you to RAS, Relative Athletic Score. Or is it Real Athletic Score?
Relative.
It's Relative Athletic
By
Score.
the way, that's a critically important word. Okay, relative.
Relative. And so I'm saying get freaks. And we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show about a draft pick years ago that was not very athletic, who was a first round draft pick. And as a result, we feel that their draft criteria changed, that they targeted getting freaks. So let me jump into some of the RAS scores of the draft picks. Broderick Jones, RAS 9.57, which is green. And it's important to remember that RAS, the maximum score is a 10. The average offensive tackle or guard, I don't have guard. I don't have tackle written here, but I'll just use guard for reference. It's probably somewhere around there. But the guard is 4.98. I'm going to guess the tackle is probably 5. So what you see is he's very athletic. At the cornerback position, Joey Porter Jr., 7.58 RAS, which is a little low. I was kind of surprised that his RAS was 7.58, which was yellow.
I'm not.
You're not.
No.
Why so? Explain.
Porter is not the athlete we're making him out to be. It confused me. Bottom line, I don't want to segue too far, but bottom line is that the need to place Joey Porter in the draft process with the team his dad played for that happens to really need a cornerback was overwhelming throughout this whole thing. It's not a surprise he fell to 32. It isn't. He was not a clear first round talent because he's not that athlete. He just isn't. Look at his numbers. He didn't even run the 3-cone because he doesn't have real quick hips. I felt legitimately like I could see because of his length and as we talk about the pedigree, I could see why a team late in the first round would take him because I don't think this was a draft that was heavy on elite first round guys. That R1 bucket was not very full this year. And I mean like 16, 17 guys. That's a little bit lighter. Porter was absolutely not within that group. He was not among those guys. He has flaws athletically. That isn't to say that he can't play. It just means when you are evaluating a guy from a first round perspective, you want to have these boxes checked. He's not that kind of an athlete. He's a 4.55 runner, not very fluid. He gets away with more because of his length. He's a tall, lanky cornerback. He tackles reasonably well, but he's not an all coverage, all scheme guy.
Let me take
to me,
that
he's
back.
a second round pick. I'm not surprised by that.
Let me take that back, Neil. I want to apologize to Joey Porter Jr. I flubbed that score. So my relative athletic
7.5 is really low for
was not good, and I was shocked at that. And because I might have put it as dad, actually,
his dad was 7. Wow.
And actually, Joey Porter Jr.'s RAS is 9.71.
Really?
Relative to the position.
I'll bet a lot of that is length then.
And to the position. And when you look at Joey Porter Jr. in terms of height, weight, bench, 40, 20-yard split, 10-yard split, vertical, and broad jump, he's green or yellow in all categories except for his weight and his vertical leap. So, but to go back to my point of the Steelers getting freaks, 9.57, 9.71. Keanu Benton, I'm just going to round it up to 9. Another green leveled RAS player, defensive tackles, the average is 5.10. Darnell Washington is the freaks come out at night, freak of all freaks, 9.88
Oh, yeah.
RAS green. The tight end RAS average 4.85. Nick Herbig 7.75. Yellow RAS score.
Small, though. He's small.
Small. That was the knock on him. Corey Trice, cornerback, RAS 9.65. Green. Spencer Anderson, offensive line 9.37. RAS score was green. Those positions in terms of their RAS are not above 5. So you clearly see that the Steelers said, we're going to get freaks. So when I look at the criteria of address needs, don't reach, exercise patience, and get freaks, I got to give the Steelers an A. Now, of course, we don't know if anybody in any of these guys could play, of course. And big up to Houdini, RIP to Ecstasy. Big up to Steelers Freak for the Houdini reference. And I give them an A too, Neil. This is the first time I came away with a draft going, damn, they hit. And so when I did my show, late that Saturday night, I graded the draft boom, bang, bang, bow, meaning they took 4 shots and hit 4 shots. It felt like Steph Curry with the shot.
He got hot.
They got hot. Boom, bang, bing, bow. Especially when they took Darnell Washington. To be able to get Darnell Washington, a guy like that, OG super freak, Rick James, in the 3rd round with the 93rd pick. I mean, of course we got to wait, be patient on these guys. They have to get coached. They have to get developed. But wow.
But that's what we should be evaluating them on, not the stuff that we don't know. We simply don't know right now the path for their development or anything. I would say, just for an example, Nick Herbig is a high-level athlete with marginal size. He's a small guy. Who's to say what type of player he's going to be when he adds 10, 15 pounds of rip over the next year? We don't know that. That's the Steelers' plan. And I'll say this, the Steelers have done it many times in the past, 5-6 years. Call it reshaping. I don't want to get into, a lot of this sounds kind of eating disorder-ish, but they are transforming a lot of the guys that they draft into the highest possible athletes they can be based on weight and conditioning. Herbig is a great athlete, but he's small for the NFL. He's situational probably at best right now. He's going to make the team based on where he was drafted. I don't know how much you can really use him outside of special teams. They want him at outside linebacker. So you look at him in that regard. He's got, as far as his dip and rip goes, he's got a little James Harrison kind of flexion to him. He's not an anchor the way Harrison was, but Harrison also very short. Keep that in mind. Harrison's 5'10" in real life. They put him at 6 foot. He wasn't 6 foot. Herbig has a long way to go to be James Harrison in terms of size or playing ability, but he has a certain thing or two that you see in his game that you can bring out. I like him as a backup, outside linebacker, situational guy, and special teams player. I think there's value to that. Plus, you're losing Alex Highsmith. I'm not putting in pen Herbig starting for Highsmith if and frankly when Highsmith leaves. But it's an interesting project. If they can get him on the right meal plan, get him in the weight room, add a bit and maintain his speed, he could be an effective player. It's interesting because look at Alex Highsmith. Alex Highsmith is like twice Herbig's size. So Highsmith, though, is not the kind of athlete that Herbig is. Good athlete, but 3rd round versus 4th round, you can see why the Steelers would be interested in him, probably as more of a backup for the short term. But your backup, especially at a position like that, the Steelers have seen plenty of injuries among outside linebackers. You can get a guy that can maintain what you're doing while he continues to develop, and he's a high level technique guy. He uses his hands very well for a college player. You can see where he had that success. His size and his development is what is going to make him a good NFL starter, or a guy that doesn't work out at all. It's a good
You
risk for them to take.
he's getting reps against his brother. You know that. You know he's getting reps against his brother, and you know that the technique part of it is probably, some of it comes with his brother and really good coaching at Wisconsin. But let me give you his RAS measurements for some of the really athletic stuff, and you were dead on. Is that his size is what kicks him down to about 7.75. But in a 40, he ran a 4.65. That was green. That was rated at 9.27. 20-yard split was 2.72, which was 8.57, which was green. And a 10-yard split was 9.28, which was always also green. And he had a vertical of 34 inches, which was yellow, 7.5. So the kid has some athleticism. He has some pop, and he has some explosiveness.
Quick out of his snap, quick to the ball, and he's slippery. You watch him. Wisconsin used Herbig in a variety of ways. He went outside, he went inside. He's a great hand fighter. He knows how to get clean off of a block, and he can track the quarterback, the ball carrier, whoever it is. One thing interesting I read in his scouting profile, the first thing that they put in there as far as his production goes, 26% of his tackles in his career, and he's a 3-year starter, 26% of all the tackles he made were for loss. That says something.
Ridiculous.
he gets into the backfield. It's tough to block him. So they're thinking he has the kind of frame. And look at his brother. His brother's twice his size, 3 times his size, even not literally. He has the kind of frame that can add some more muscle without sacrificing his speed and his quickness. If they can keep that going and get him bulked up, he's always going to be a smaller outside linebacker, but he might be able to make hay with the makeup that he has.
She big, she bangs. I mean, like, I love the fact that they have 2 she big brothers. And I talked about it. Bloodlines matter with the Steelers. And if you're going to, in a process, and I was saying it on the show, on a process in which there are so many unknowns, you like to be able to check off the bloodline box. The DNA is solid, and the mentality is solid as well. Those guys know what it takes to play football, especially if you're little bro. Little bro, when you get little bro and big bro, I mean, that's just a fantastic combination. Little bro was poured into by big bro. So you get all that tutelage and that knowledge, and you get what importance that football brings to it for them as a family. So I love the fact that the Steelers go out and they hit bloodlines. Let's jump into who's your favorite pick of this lot.
Darnell
I know who you're going
Washington.
to say, and explain why Big Freak Darnell, Big Sexy is your favorite.
What I find to be the most difficult offenses in the league to stop are ones that can roll out a variety of different styles within a few formations. And what I mean by that is if we're to take 12 personnel, put 2 tight ends on the field, let's look at the Steelers personnel for that right now. Probably Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington. I'm going to put Washington in there because he's effing Darnell Washington. Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, opposite sides of the field, with Najee Harris in the backfield. There's a lot of versatility with that, and it's putting the onus on your quarterback to determine what the best way to go with this is. Matt Canada, for as much as you all hate Matt Canada without knowing really why Canada is doing what he's doing, one thing he has brought to this team that doesn't get talked about is the proliferation of the run pass option, the RPO. The Steelers run RPOs probably more often than any team in the league over the last 2 years. And I know that they were the highest 2 years ago, and I think they ranked pretty highly last year as well. They brought in Ciamalo, the guard from Philadelphia, another team that runs a bunch of RPOs. I'm guessing because he's familiar with that. The Steelers' offensive line had problems blocking that last season, not getting where they needed to go, didn't spring a whole lot of big plays after the catch. I think their plan with a guy like Washington is be able to run RPOs out of 12, which is to say they have two athletic pass-catching tight ends, two talented wide receivers, and a versatile running back. Put that together, Pickett can go to the line and look around, train him to read what a defense is showing him, and decide with an RPO where he's going to go with that. Now, to break this down, a run-pass option is not the quarterback running the ball, first off. It is a decision made in a way, both pre-snap and post-snap by the quarterback. You can pull it and hand off if somebody moves where you want them to go or doesn't move where you want them to go after the snap. But pre-snap, you're making a call at the line, and your offensive line is coming out of their stance and staying roughly around the line of scrimmage. That's how you see an RPO is happening. If they drop too far back, they're not going to be able to run blocks, so that option's gone, and the defense can see it right away. If they go too far forward, they're going to be flagged for illegal man downfield if they're throwing the ball. We saw the Steelers do that, 9 times last year, something like that, just something ridiculous. They can get in sync with that with better personnel who understand the scheme, with a quarterback who's had more training with it now, who's going to go into training camp as the number one guy. Washington brings an element to that, which is to say, we see them in double tight. We see them up at the line like that. Generally, we're going to cheat run. This is a team that runs the ball a lot. But Washington and Freiermuth are both guys that can run the seam, meaning they're athletic enough to get down 10, 12 yards straight down the seam where you're covering them with linebackers that they're probably faster than, or safeties who they're definitely bigger than. You have a mismatch right there. Plus, if you're paying attention to that, you've got a great deep receiver on the other side, and you've got a great underneath receiver on weak side or strong side, whatever that is. And you still have the option to run the ball for a team that likes to run. They can still block inside zone the way that we've seen a lot of success second half of last season with Harris. And I might add, Darnell Washington knows how to block inside zone. He's a beast. The dude hits. Okay. Put him and Jones next to each other. They're going to kill defensive backs in the NFL. The options that they have because of a talent like that, to put it mildly, grossly exceed what they could do with Zach Gentry. And I like Zach Gentry. Really impressed with the career that he built for himself. He's going to be the odd man out here, unfortunately for him. I'm sure he's going to get signed somewhere else. He's a decent NFL tight end. But Washington brings a much more dangerous element because he is able to run routes. He is able to get open across the middle. He's able to run after the catch, and he is able to block downfield like a damn bastard. And that, more than anything, that's the value that the Steelers are building. They're going to be a very tough, physical, short passing team to try to spring more big plays. Not we need to throw the ball 50 yards downfield to make a big play. They're going to start to get the run after catch that they haven't been able to get the last 2 years because of the personnel that they're bringing onto the field. Washington's going to be a big part of that. I don't expect Washington to get more than like maybe 20 targets, but he's gonna hit people. You're going to see him spring runs, whether that's a handoff, whether it's a pass. You're going to see him be an instrumental part of the short, quick game the Steelers are building.
When I look at the picks, so your favorite is Darnell Washington, obviously. And, when you look at Darnell, you're just like, wow. I mean, and Georgia was so ridiculous that Darnell wasn't even the best tight end on the team. It's the other kid from Napa, California that's the best guy.
It's funny. It's a funny argument to get into there, but ideally, the funny thing is, I think the Steelers are looking up at Georgia. I think that's what they want out of their tight ends. I think they want I hate this cliche, but the thunder and lightning combination that Georgia had between those two totally different players. Washington has more utility. You can use Washington in more ways to help your entire offense. He doesn't have to be a high-level target like I forgetting his name, the other kid who's a beast. That kid's got an NFL future for sure. Washington can set up a lot more. Now, I don't mean to derail what you're saying here, but one of the biggest problems the Steelers had going into last season after they drafted Pickens was, in a way, they traded one problem for another. They got a much better split end outside deep receiver in Pickens, but to keep Claypool on the field, which they needed to do because they didn't really have anybody else, they had to move him into the slot. And he's not a slot receiver. He barely knows what he's doing on the outside, and he's got a God-given body to play outside receiver in the NFL. Moving him inside was to utilize what they hoped would be his size for underneath stuff and to help in the short game, in the quick game, passing. He can not just catch the ball, but blocking. They don't have that with Claypool because he can't really do it. But the Steelers slot now, Allen Robinson, a bigger guy, he can catch the ball. But imagine packages where you put Washington on the opposite side of that. Have Washington run underneath and help block across. Have Washington release in front of a screen to his size. The guy is built like a B-52. He's absolutely huge, and he knows how to block. He, for a rookie tight end, he's got obviously some work to do. They'll coach him up on that, but he is such a weapon for others around him. He's a weapon without the ball. The Steelers need that so badly. I really wanted them to bring back Juju Smith-Schuster for that reason, because he's a very good slot receiver.
I did too.
In helping set others up. Perfect in Kansas City. I was surprised Kansas City didn't bring him back. New England's smart. They're going to use him in a similar way, but Kansas City got a lot out of Juju because of what he does without the ball. And Washington, in my opinion, is the Steelers' answer to that. He's not a slot receiver, but he can eat up a tackling, pursuit 5-7 yards off the line, and you're going to see him utilized in that way. Not going to be a 70 catch guy, I don't think anyway, but he's going to be a hellaciously talented second tight end in a quick game offense like the Steelers are building.
You know what? I'm looking on the chat, and big up to Toy Called God from Aliquippa. Big up to him. Spent a ton of time out in Beaver Falls and in Rochester at my aunt's house. I had a lot of people in my family that were Rochester Rams. They went to Rochester forever. And my cousin was a great athlete for Rochester, ended up being a triple jumper at Penn State. So big up to all those guys out there in Aliquippa, Rochester, and Beaver Falls out in that area. Speaking, you were talking about like the combination of Jones and Washington, and I was on Twitter yesterday. They were asking what would be a great combination name for those two guys, and Jake Shoot Stuff said the B-52s. I'm going to give you a name that I think would be a great combination for those guys: Crunch and Munch. I think Crunch and Munch would be awesome. Maybe I'm dating myself. You know what Crunch and Munch is, don't you, Neil?
The Cracker Jack knockoff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Probably better than Cracker Jacks.
It's better. It's
absolutely.
It's actually crack. I mean, it is actually crack. You cannot eat Crunch and Munch. Like Crunch and Munch, as soon as you open it, you eat the whole bag. It's like the perfect road trip snack. Crunch and Munch and a Coke, you can probably drive across the country, without stopping, because that's Crunch and Munch. So anyway, I'm saying Crunch and Munch. I like B-52s. I like the Road Warriors. But they're going to be a fun combination.
They're the dogs.
They're going to be the dogs is a good one. But they're going to be a good combination, and they're going to put them together.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. There are clips of them combo blocking, reaching, in again quick game offense, which is a lot of what Georgia did. It's nasty. I mean, it's against college guys, but some of them, it's like, holy shit, he almost killed that guy. You see both of them get downfield and just destroy whoever's there. They're mean. They want to block. They want to be physical. And with Jones, the great thing with him is while he's still got work to do as a pass protector, they drafted him because of that attitude. He is a mean son of a bitch as far as getting off the line and getting downfield. I think he plays like a guard. I think really it's like he's the type of guy that, and this is an old school offensive lineman cliche, they don't like pass protection as much. You're awkward dropping back. You're absorbing the blow from the guy that's coming in. They like run blocking because they get to dish it out. And Broderick Jones looks like the type to me that's like, yeah, pass blocking is going to get me paid, but at the end of the day, I still want to hit somebody, and he gets after it. Technically, he's got some improvement that he needs to develop, but clearly the Steelers have never drafted an offensive tackle with the high-end potential talent that Jones has, and it's most evident in the run game or the quick pass game, which is what the Steelers are going to do. It's a great fit schematically between those, and to put the two of them together, I honestly believe the Steelers felt they really needed the value of the defensive tackle that, in my opinion, fell to 49 with Keanu Benton. They couldn't pass on that. I honestly don't think they felt Washington was going to be there in the fourth round. The late third round. I don't think they anticipated that. But the second that he's there and they had the chance to take him, they went and took him. And it's two guys that fit what they do very, very well and can be great specialty specific types of players for what they do, and they're going to eat. They're both really good football players. I'm very excited to see what each of the first four picks, maybe five. Herbig is kind of interesting, but the first four that they have, they're all unique players, and they're dudes. I don't know if they've ever drafted four dudes like this. I wasn't alive in 74, so I'll just couch it by saying in my lifetime, I don't think they've ever drafted four dudes like this. It's exciting, and we have reason for optimism. Nobody on this show will ever accuse me of being the overly optimistic Homer Steelers fan. Okay. I'm telling you, there is plenty of reason for optimism with this group. And that's no bullshit.
Yes. And I'm telling you, like, we are a match made in not being hyperbolic. So we're like the non-hyperbolic twins, and we're both excited. We both gave this draft an A, and let me give you my favorite pick. My favorite pick is Corey Trice. And I have not seen Corey Trice play. I'm not even sure he's going to make the roster, but I mean, his measurables.
Big dude. Yeah.
I mean, he's baby blunt. And I don't want to put Mel Blunt and the pressure on the kid like that, but he's baby blunt. When you look at his RAS stuff, is very close to Joey Porter's 9.65 to 971. The kid is 6'3 and a half, weighs 206, benched 17 times. I mean, the broad jump was 11 feet. This kid is just an athletic freak. His shuttle was 4.06, which is green. 3-cone was green, 9.49. You're talking about a big guy, almost 6'4", that can get a 9.49 score, a 6.7 in a 3-cone. That means he can move. He has fluid hips. I mean, this is the type of guy that if you can grab in the 7th round and he becomes somebody, he has this RAS, this athletic profile to be a great type of pick that you get late in the round. I mean, I didn't want to pick Darnell Washington because Neil picked Darnell Washington before me. And Darnell was the obvious guy because Darnell is
in our pre-shows. I was telling people, I'm not even going to act as if they're going to draft him because they're not going to do that. I'm not going to get my hopes up for this. I was legitimately I stood up with my hands over my head, like, please. And it was mentioned by somebody in here. Yeah, Jake shoots shit again. He said something to the effect of there wasn't much time that passed before they took it. I think they ran. I really do, because it was like, okay, the Steelers are on the clock. The pick is in. They're not screwing around. They knew exactly who they wanted. One of the annoying parts of the draft, and if you watch the entire thing like I do, like other people in media kind of have to do, You get really annoyed after a while with the bullshit. Oh, the camera's on us. We got to clap and act like this is a great thing. I legitimately think the Steelers are beside themselves that he fell. There are medical concerns. Okay. I've heard knee, I've heard back. There might be concerns with that. And Lance, as you and I talked about offline in regards to Washington, dudes that are that big, that have that much athletic ability, they're ahead of the normal human evolution. They're pushing past that, and his body might not be able to take the sheer explosiveness that he has at the size that he is. He might have injury concerns, but you don't draft guys because you honestly think they're going to play for you for 10 years. Okay. General managers don't last 10 years, anywhere close to 10 years on average. Head coaches don't last 10 years on average. They're drafting guys for probably the next 3 years. And with Washington, you can get enough out of him, injured or otherwise. He doesn't have to be an 80-plus snap a game guy. You can use him situationally, and he'll be very good in the role that he plays. Sorry, I'm rambling about this. This is how huge on this pick that I am. And to address it before, and unfortunately the NFL doesn't include tight ends in the group of positions that can wear number 0, but if he could, or I don't know, maybe they get creative, don't call him a tight end. That would be fantastic. If Darnell Washington was wearing number 0 for the Steelers, I wouldn't just own that jersey. I would have that already. I promise you. And I haven't bought a jersey in 12 years, probably. I would own that immediately.
I love for the combination of the two, big up the Steelers freak. That might win the Hanson brothers.
The Hansons.
The Hanson brothers might win the Black Hansons. That would be even better.
Black Hansons.
The Black Hansons. That would be even better. That would be even better. The Hansons, and of course, Steelers freak. I'm old. Steelers freak is old. We're dating ourselves, but you probably seen it. The Hansons brothers from Slapshot, the guys that just dropped gloves and fought instantly whenever the clock started. Slapshot was great.
Maybe the best sports movie ever made. I'd have a list of like 5 of them, and I would argue.
The Fish to Save Pittsburgh, baby. I'm biased.
God, no.
The Pittsburgh Pisces.
Slapshot. It's one of the best. It's probably the best written sports movie. It's acted very well. The Hanson brothers were some of the best, most memorable characters of all time. The Black Hansons. Can I even say that? I don't think I'm allowed to say that.
Yes, the Black
Hansons. I'll get fired if I do.
Yes. Yes.
If they are like that, I'll say it here. I'm not going to probably write it, but I'll say it here.
Yes.
And I will love every fucking minute of it, because those two, I'm telling you, they're dudes. They get after it. Once they get comfortable with what they're doing, the Steelers are going to turn them loose. Quick game is going to explode.
Guys are coming up with some great ones. Jones, Washington, and Associates like that one too. That's a great one as well. But before we get out of here, what are the remaining needs? What are the Steelers' biggest remaining needs? We feel they did a great job in addressing some of their needs, particularly with the first 4 or first 5 picks. What are their remaining needs most glaring to you that stand out?
I think we're at the point, and this is typical after a draft. You kind of get the post high going to think that a team doesn't really have needs, but if we look at needs in a literal sense, and again, I can't just rule out the future for them. I think they're down cornerbacks after this season. I think a lot of them who are in 1-year deals right now are susceptible. They might get cut. We might not even have 2 of the 4 primary cornerbacks this team's going to play right now. They don't have any particular need to keep Witherspoon if they get a better option available in free agency. Something else to point out here, that since this topic is coming up, yesterday was the deadline for the compensatory period of the NFL, meaning if you sign a guy today after 4 p.m. Eastern yesterday to your team, it does not affect your compensatory formula. So this is what's kind of unofficially called the second wave of free agency. So there are a lot of big name guys that are not signed right now. It would not surprise me if the Steelers went shopping, for somebody else. Maybe it's a middle linebacker. Cornerback is coming up quite a bit. I wouldn't surprise me, excuse me, to see them take a stroll and kind of see who else is out there, and that'll lead straight up into training camp. There are a lot of transactions still to go. I think they've done what they're going to do as far as veteran depth goes at inside linebacker. They signed 2 of them.
Yeah, they signed 2 of them.
You got a guy coming back as well. I don't think they're making another move there. I wouldn't have been surprised if they drafted one, but that wasn't the way they were going to go about it. They did draft 2 cornerbacks. I think that the 7th round kid might make the team just by default. I'm not sure. I don't think you're going to keep James Pierre over him. So we'll see what happens with that. It's I hate to say this because my throat's closing off for some reason. I hate to say this because it's in a way disrespectful, but remember, just for recent precedent, what happened with David DeCastro. He showed up for mini camp. They checked in on a surgery. They determined he would probably need another surgery, and they cut him. That we're not done with that yet. It depends on who's available. It depends on what shape guys are in when they come back. It's not, the roster creation is not over yet. There's still going to be moves here and there. I don't know if they're going to be big, but you'll see guys added. Odds are probably pretty good. You never would have heard of him before. Like the dude, the slot they just signed from the Vikings. I don't even remember his name now. I keep thinking of Landon Roberts. It's something like that. I have no clue whether he'll make the team or not, but if Maulet's too expensive, if Maulet is not the shape they need him to be, they've got another guy there. They're going to make signings like that.
I think when I look at the roster, I think, I think in the chat, I think guys are dead on. I think there is an issue at slot corner. And of course, still, we're talking about an offense, that didn't score 20 points per game. So there is, definitely, there is a need, in my opinion, for slot corner. Of course, I had to change the background graphic and put the the picture of the Hanson brothers as they've gotten older. But the Hanson brothers are absolutely legendary. I am very excited. I can't wait till the football part starts. I'm hoping that Darnell Washington is healthy and gets to play. But I think Steeler Nation should be absolutely excited about this draft. I think the con artist is doing a fantastic job. And it was funny to see Tomlin and Omar Khan, in the con artist, laugh about the nickname itself. But, I think the Steelers are in good hands. I think Omar Khan has come out in these last couple of drafts. Well, not last draft, but I think Omar Khan has done a fantastic job. I think the Steelers are in good hands with Tomlin and Khan, TK. I think that's a good combination. Weedle's done a fantastic job. I think we see his impact as well. And I think Steeler fans should be excited about the future and particularly be excited about this draft. I think still, when you look at this team overall, and it was mentioned in one of the comments earlier, is, bottom line, the ultimate development of this team is going to depend largely on Kenny Pickett and his development. But, Kenny showed signs. He showed big paws last year. He had some big paws. So, when I say big paws, that's just a reference to, if you get a dog, you look for dogs with big paws. So, Kenny showed some paws last year. So we'll see, his development. But I'm excited about this draft, and I never get excited about drafts. Any last thing you want to say, Neil?
Nope, just that I'm excited. It's nice to wrap up with all this. I'm looking forward to going over it for the rest of the off season, and we'll be around to keep talking about all this and see how it all comes together.
And with that, we are going to conclude the program. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the program, especially if you're new in the chat. We give you a show every Wednesday, and then we give you shows in terms of, if there's some breaking news. Neil pretty much does that. And, we're going to keep bringing you great shows and talking about this fantastic football team. But with that, we're going to conclude the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. The Black Hansons.